Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. We have more fan footage for you today. This was sent in by Judd. This is the Boulder Center for Orthopedics crit up on Table Mountain in Denver, Colorado, or close to Denver at least. And it's up on a little plateau, up at some elevation, so you can see it's pretty exposed to some wind. In this case, it's coming from the northeast. It's an otherwise pretty straightforward course. You can see this is actually a racetrack, so there are no curbs. You can get a little bit riskier on the line choices through here because it just kind of turns into either like grass or gravel. This is the Cat 4 field. It's like a full 40-person field, 50-person field, something like that. There were several other teams that brought 4 or 5 riders each, and Judd is on the Twin Peaks racing team. And their plan was to ride a breakaway. That was objective number 1, was to establish a breakaway. They showed up with 3 riders, and it would be at this point I would show you a picture of their jersey, but I literally didn't see a single time one of Judd's teammates was in front of him. And even though they started with 3, they actually only finished with 1, so more on that later. With that being said, let's just dive right into it and see how well they executed on their plan to make the breakaway. Okay, we are about halfway through the race, and well, what's the best way to make the breakaway? Is to start the breakaway yourself, and that's what Judd does right here. He sees this good opportunity, puts in this nice attack, carries his momentum through that corner, and does it on the downwind side. I wanted to compliment Judd for being smart about that. Everyone was on the right. You can see the wind is kind of a headwind, but it's also a right to left crosswind. So he attacked on the left side of the field, which is the sheltered side of the field. What they were doing on the far right, I have no idea. And now that Judd has separation, he can move to the far right in anticipation for this upcoming right-hand bend, because if you're by yourself, it doesn't really matter what the draft is happening behind you, and he is by himself. I know you guys don't have the rear cam, but he is by himself, so yeah, take the fastest line through these corners, which is the inside on these corners, is always the fastest, so don't really have to worry about the draft behind you if there's nobody behind you. Now, if your goal is to make the breakaway, you got to be in the top 20 or so, and you really have to be able to preserve your momentum. And the way that Judd got away back there past the field was a good example of that. He carried his speed through the corner, he attacked on the sheltered side of the field, and he preserved all of his speed. And that means that you can get separation, get that breakaway going, break the elastic, as they say, without having to really dive into like really high quadruple digit power numbers. And then I think the other big skill for a successful breakaway rider is recognizing who is in the group and knowing, you know, when to commit 100% to the breakaway. Like in this case, there's several other large teams that brought 4 or 5 riders each, and if I were in Judd's position right here off the front solo, I wouldn't be, this isn't the hill I would die on. I would be checking back, and I would be trying to force a selection, so I'd be hoping at this point that other racers from the other major teams represented are going to bridge across, because that's the combination that you want. You want riders from each of the large teams represented in the group up the road, and that leaves nobody to chase, because if you think about it, one guy who's got 4 teammates, if he's in the breakaway with you, his 4 other teammates aren't going to be chasing in the field behind. So you're basically eliminating 4 other chasers from the chasing peloton. And that's what you want. If you have a bunch of guys represented, either just by their teams or just by the raw numbers themselves, the breakaway is more likely to succeed. But as it stands right now, Judd's by himself, which means there are several other large teams who are all going to be eager and willing to chase him back, and that's why I wouldn't overcommit to this solo breakaway. Okay, so unfortunately for Judd, it did not work out, and he was brought back a couple of laps later. But he got away at the perfect timing, so he didn't have to use a lot of energy to get away, and then he didn't overcommit when he was off the front. He kept it really smooth, so it's not that big of a deal. You know, sometimes being off the front is actually more energy efficient than being in the field. If the field is really surgy, there's tons of little accelerations, they're taking bad lines through corners, stuff like that, it actually might make more sense to be off the front in those cases. So just don't be afraid to put it in attack, especially if you can preserve your momentum and get separation for free. And oh, there's a crash on the left. Big Cat 4 field in a large bunch like this, in the crosswind. You know, I'm not surprised it didn't happen sooner. Actually, on second thought, it did happen sooner. And his first teammate was taken out in the first crash, and then his second teammate was taken out in the second crash. So now he's flying solo. And by the way, look at all this space he's given right here to ride on the left-hand side of the road, the sheltered side of the road. I feel like all the races I'm in, we would just be like frantically weaving through those cones on the left right up against the gutter like it's a slalom or something. So it's smart of him to take advantage of the sheltered draft side of the pack right here. But anyway, now that he's racing solo, that should change his race strategy. Now he has to be extremely selective if he wants to commit to a breakaway, or he has to be sure to follow the right teams if there's going to be a field sprint and an organized lead out. But, you know, this is Cat 4, so it seems unlikely that there's going to be an organized lead out, but you get my point. So let's fast forward a bit and see if he changes his race plans now that he's racing solo. Alright, so we're 2 laps to go now, and it's getting to be crunch time, and he's a little bit too far back here. You can see he's probably like 30th wheel or something like that. And you can see he waits for this tailwind section, and instead of touching his brakes or coasting, he just carries all of his momentum down this tailwind section, and you can see he's just passing people. Nobody's pedaling. Look on the left. Nobody's pedaling. Always a good time to move up when nobody's pedaling like that. And what he's done is he's positioned himself into this inside corner, and look at that. He passed like 15 or 20 riders for free, basically. Even though Judd is still pretty new to road cycling, he is a Coloradan. He's from Colorado. Is it Coloradan? I don't know. Maybe I'm sounding like an idiot. But he comes from mountain biking, and I feel like he just has an understanding of like line selection and bike handling, and that really paid off for him right there. But then, of course, now that I'm saying that, here he is on the wrong side of the road, and he was so good about this for like the whole race, but now that it matters the most and they're coming through with 2 laps to go, he is on the wrong side of the road. You can see all the power he's having to do just to hold his position right here, and that's no good. What I would have done is come out of that right-hand corner on the inside like he did. I commend him for that, but then I would have found a way to slot in on the left, on the sheltered side, so you don't have to do like, you know, a super threshold effort for that whole section leading into this first right-hander. All right, guys, it is almost last lap time. We're going to be coming through the bell lap here in a couple of seconds, and let's see how Judd handles himself here without any teammates. And you can see the craziness has started already spiking up to close to 1,000 watts, and this is going to be a field sprint. It's all back together now. This is it right here. There's no riders off the front. This is for the win. And Judd, remember, no teammates. El Lobo solo. He is following this team with the red jerseys and the light blue armbands. That's a good start. That's what I would be looking for, some type of team organization. You don't often see it in the 4s, but I'm seeing it right now, which is pretty cool. These guys are going to try to bring their sprinter up towards the front. That's what it looks like to me, and I would be following that pretty closely. And this is what you see sometimes, especially in the lower categories. You had a big mad dash, and then the people who are on the front don't want to be on the front anymore. So there's not a great organization. If there was a team actually setting tempo on the front, setting an actual lead up for their sprinter, it would be crazy fast from, you know, 4 or 5 laps to go even, all the way to the finish. But right here, this is kind of the typical scrum of crazy field sprinting when there isn't team control, or it's, you know, kind of a Cat 4, Cat 5 field. Sometimes even Cat 3, there isn't much control. So here comes Judd trying to kind of surf around and find the right lines. I like his position right here. He's getting a good shelter. You don't want to be too close to the front on the last lap here if you want to duke it out in the sprint. For obvious reasons, you don't want to be too far back either. And now it's getting stretched out. Somebody's going hard on the front. You can see that big wide peloton that was, you know, 8 or 9 riders wide is now 2 or 3 riders wide. And now it's just falling apart towards the front. That's all it takes is, you know, 1 or 2 riders to say that's enough for me. I'm calling it quits. And when they pull the plug, a big
You gotta cover!
Yes. Oh, Judd's using one of my favorite tricks here. I shouldn't be saying this on the channel, but man, yelling at people when they're redlining like this and it's the last lap, you gotta cover that. It totally works, and this is working for Judd. I love this. Somebody asked me in the comments in my last video, you know, about communication during a race. This probably isn't exactly what they had in mind, but yelling at somebody, you gotta cover that. Like, oftentimes they're so cross-eyed, they just assume, oh, that's my teammate. So they'll just cover whatever gap.
Go, 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 go!
I love this. It's totally working. This Trek kid is just going as hard as he can, turning himself inside out. Judd's just getting the best draft ever. And now attack. Yes! Yes! He puts in a big power surge and makes sure that those guys that just towed him halfway couldn't get in his draft because he accelerated really hard. And now, what is he, at the front of the race now? There's one more guy he's got to pass. He's just got to put his head down now. We're at 300 meters to go with 2 corners left. It's time to jam it right onto the back of these riders, and they're looking back. This guy's tired. I would attack straight through. Less than 200 meters. Just keep going. Go, Judd. Go, Judd. Go. Yes. Do it. So epic. Oh man, my palms are sweaty. That was a good one. Thanks for sending the footage in, Judd. Congrats on the win, and thanks everybody for watching. If you liked it, click like. If you want to subscribe, it's free. Just click the button. See you guys at the next one.